In the beginning, paradox with IP, it doesn't matter because investors ask, but the market doesn't care. You can infringe, you can do things without having protection. Nobody cares because they don't believe in you or your idea. And when you hit the market success, everybody cares. They went to all the competitors and said, you get a license to our patent for free. Now we have the market to build out the infrastructure, and they get the funding. The market for their scooters became 10 times as large.
If you have no knowledge about IP, then there should be a light bulb going off right now. Welcome to Talk IP to Me in the newest episode where we sit down with IP professionals, founder, and interesting minds to share stories behind the work. Today, I'm joined by Jonas Hagman, European patent attorney, IP strategist, and the founder of IPsteading. Jonas works with startups and SMEs to build patent and IP strategies that match their actual product roadmap. And all on top of that, all his learnings are shared in his podcast series called In the Head of a Founder. I very much recommend to check that out. Welcome, Jonas.
Thank you very much. Such nice introduction.
Well, such nice career path. You have created this for yourself. So thank you for being here. So for those who don't know you yet, how does a patent attorney end up in the position where you are right now?
Oh, that's a great question. As a patent attorney, I started in the industry, in a German company, moved back to Sweden. I'm Swedish from the beginning. Started in private practice, advisory, and saw already back then, this was about 2008, that it was flaws in the advisory. It was a lot about registering IPR. So, you want a patent? Oh, we can solve that, and they got their patent. The clients go to the patent attorney and they ask for a patent, and they get a patent. They don't get that many questions back. That's obviously a lot dependent on which attorney and advisor you actually get in touch with, but in general, it looks like that, and it still looks like that. And that concerned me already back then. And it was there, and I was trying, and I did a lot, and I learned a lot from different people that had a different approach and asked more questions. Because at the end, if you go to Hertz or Avis that rent out cars, and you want to go to Berlin, they will rent you a car, right? But and the same is for patents. If you go to a patent attorney and ask them to write a patent, they write you a patent, and it's good so. But what startups and SMEs that don't have the IP understanding or knowledge today, they don't need a patent attorney because there's a lot of great patent attorneys out there. They need their travel and so they need an IP agency. They need the one that asks them the questions, what do you actually need? So you want to go to Berlin. That's interesting. What's best for you? Do you want to run? Do you want to take the bike? Should you take the boat trip together with your car? Want to take the train, or do you want to take a flight? So there's a lot of options, and all of them doesn't fit your needs. And that's the question, but in terms of IP, that all SMEs and startups need to ask themselves, and that I have lived and explored how you can do that better as a patent attorney, and now in my own setting then have taken one step further.
In one of your previous interviews that I found online, you described yourself as a translator. A translator, especially between IP and business. What does that actually mean, especially for startups and SMEs?
When you're very deep into something, it doesn't matter if it's law or tech or could be philosophy, you use your own language because you get used to it. And the language has a tendency to not necessarily get more complex, but more niche. And the same is for, obviously, in IP. There's a lot of abbreviations like PCT application, and then you mix it up, and next time you say international patent application, but it's the same thing. And for the receiver of that message, it could easily be confusing if you don't know all the terminology. And that's part of what I'm doing and I always try to do. And I think also the industry have become much better in explaining what they are doing, but there's still a lot to do.
I love that. I very much love that. So, what do you actually do now? What does IP studying do with you spearheading it?
The brand name comes from, so IPsteading get inspired from the homesteading movement. Do you know homesteading? You move outside the cities and you farm and you grow everything yourself. And I believe that SMEs and startups should do the same thing. Not that they should be experts in all IP matters, but they need to understand IP on a much higher business level than they do today. And that's, for me, is IPsteading. So I started with 2 services. That's fractional IP manager and as a senior advisory, that it's become more of an IP coach because just to take the language into the setting where it is delivered, right?
So basically, you are a coach, you are an advisor, you are sort of a second dad to some of these founders in a business and IP sense. And then you also provide them with the books, or in this case, a sort of a knowledge base to help them learn.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
I would say second dad is not a bad description. I don't draft any patent applications myself today. I'm helping my clients to order the patent applications they actually need.
What I'm very interested in hearing about is, let's say, I'm a startup, maybe in Sweden or anywhere else. Maybe I'm in renewable energy or doing something that is sort of in the sphere where IP is quite important. I don't know anything about IP. I found your services. I sit down with you. What's the first thing you do?
Well, now I would direct them to my course and to the platform, because there I also have a free course that is IP Kickstart, to just go through the basics. What is IP? What are the IPRs? Because IP is much more than now you see, speaking about Translator, now I'm falling in directly into my own language. So IP is intellectual property, but it's actually broader than that. It's also intellectual assets that you should look at, because that's where it all starts, or starts with an asset. And it's first when you or your company then actually owns it, it's an intellectual property, it's an IP. And the golds and diamonds of those you want to pick up and make to IPRs, that's intellectual property rights. And that's the patents, the trademarks, copyright, design rights. So that would I do to guide them into that, or help them understand these basics. What is IP in general, and what IP do they have in their business? So that's the next step then. And I normally, in these kind of sessions, let them in the very beginning list their IP, and they come up with 2 or 3. Yeah, we have a brand name. Didn't we file a patent a couple of years ago? And it's something like that. And they have a list of 2, 3. And then we walk through what could IP actually be in this broadest sense. And then all of a sudden they have a list of 20. And it's not that I find them, that I know what IP they have. It's just that I help them guide to understand what IP actually is, because they will always be the experts on their business. I'm, as an outsider, will never be the expert on their business. I can just help them guide and understand what they actually have.
So people start to understand what IP is. They start to list all of their potential or actual IP rights. Then what happens? And I would like to give you here a small challenge, a 90 days challenge. So if you were to advise us or me or a company in a similar position, now I have the basic understanding. And let's say I allocate maybe 5,000 euros on it. Where do I spend it first? What do I do?
It's an ever continuous game that you need to play and understand. And you take small steps, because it's not very complicated, but it's very complex. And it's tightly aligned with your business. Because next step, if you have understand what IP in terms of the broadest sense with all the intellectual assets, and then what the intellectual property and the intellectual property rights are, the ultimate question is, for what use do you have for it? How do you leverage these assets that you have into your business? And that, I would say, you should spend your 90 months on exploring. And if for your business, that means that you keep as much as possible as trade secrets, or you file a bunch of patents or trademarks, it's up to you to decide at the time when you start identifying your intellectual assets, which you do continuously, because intellectual assets are created by the mind, and they are created all the time by you and by all your employees. So you need to do this all the time and make it automatic, so you understand. So at the sense, you want to build an IP structure, organization, and culture in your business, that these basic parts of IP identification, evaluation goes automatic, because that's what will over time build a valuable IP portfolio. It's very important to continuously build your portfolio and not believe we have already filed the diamond patent. Because when it also further on, when it comes so far and you want to use that patent, it can be that somebody else has spent 2 months on prior art search and find a killer, so it's not even valid. And the patent that you thought was not that relevant is the only one still standing.
That's so
and you
interesting.
can never know that until you're on the when it's sharp, the situation is sharp.
I think it's so golden what you are sharing here, especially when you mention, the uncertainty about the future. So you make a decision now, and then 2 years down the line, maybe that decision will be completely different. So help me understand, how can founders, startups, and SMEs incorporate what you refer to as, IP culture, or having that aspect come up when they are making decisions and be part of the general structure of how they do business?
I think the basic is fostering a learning culture, because everybody starts at some point. It doesn't matter if you don't have any knowledge about IP or some knowledge of IP. Start exploring, start filing your first patents, your trademarks, keep your trade secrets, and also get rid of those that you don't feel is relevant anymore, and keep working on it. You will do mistakes. That is, everybody does mistakes, and you do that all the time, and you learn and you evolve. So it's about starting today, because there are some crucial mistakes you can do in the beginning, and that's the basics in terms of be sure that you own the intellectual assets that you need for your business. So you have the agreements in place. Be sure, if you want something patented in the future, or believe we want to file a patent of this, that keep it secret so it doesn't slip out and you have destroyed your patentability by yourself by making it public. And I think it's the only way. Use your advisors, not just to file and draft your applications. Ask them questions. Make sure that they understand your business, and withdraw as much information from them as possible. Because at the end, you need to be in control of building your IP portfolio. You can't let that alone be a decision from an external advisor that doesn't have the proper insight in your business. Because especially in a startup, it evolves daily or weekly, and it goes so fast that you need to be there and have this. So even if you don't know much, start doing something. I would say in that sense, it's not different than any other subject. Start doing, take action and learn. Take action and learn.
Especially in the sort of the lean startup age, when you just need to constantly test and then learn, and then test and learn and iterate. One thing that you just mentioned now, which really intrigued me, was use your advisor, use your patent attorney, ask a lot of questions, make them part of your business. But essentially by doing that, you are also building, a long-term relationship, sort of including them into your business operations to a certain degree. So How can you help, or what is your recommendations for founders finding the right attorney, finding the right partner for them to, build that IP portfolio or monitor it for, 5 to 10 years in the future?
Yeah, I would say in most cases, I don't think the patent attorney is the right person, being there, understanding the business and helping building that IP portfolio in terms of on a strategic level. I think most patent attorneys, or my experience is that most patent attorneys are very comfortable and very good at drafting patents and make sure that you get the patent you ordered, you get the Hertz car that you wanted. But most of them, doesn't have the experience of building business and understanding the business level in terms of what should you actually have it for. How do you leverage this patent to actually that business opportunity that you wanted? How does these patents open that market that you so much desire to get into? And I think in most cases that are different persons. And even if the patent attorney has that ability, there are advantages in having different persons working with the strategy and the one that are drafting the patents and doing the details in the patents, because doing both, it's easy to fall back to the details when instead of keeping the overall strategy in mind all the time. So I think there's a lot of benefit in separating that. It can be done for most startups. You probably need one point of contact because you can't afford too many advisors on that level. And that's why it's important to build that understanding yourself. And I would say the understanding when it comes to IP strategy, it's more of a business understanding. What do I want to do with my business? And what are these tools in terms of trade secrets, patents, trademarks? How can I use them? So you understand the tools in your toolbox, not necessarily need to understand how you draft them, or probably you shouldn't learn that. You should understand how you use a drill. If you have a drill in your toolbox, you should know how you use the hammer and for what purpose you have it in there to navigate your business.
What I usually refer to, IP as an asset. You refer to them as tools, which I think are very similar, but at the same time, there is, of course, a difference. So, could you please walk me through how can someone use IP as a tool to their advantage, whether that's commercial advantage or perhaps blocking out a competitor or anything along those lines?
Yeah, well, the most basic parts, what is an IP, intellectual property right, an IPR, a patent? So it's a right to forbid someone else to use your patented technology. So that's the first and the basic use of the tool. You have a technology advantage and you don't allow someone else to use that on the market, and that's jurisdiction that you have your patent. But it also gives you the right to allow someone to do it. Because you have the right to forbid, you have also the right to allow by giving it away as a free license or actually have a paid license. It could be exclusive or non-exclusive. And with that, it's actually only the imagination that stops what you can do with it. I have a favorite example, and that's Indian startup company. They started in 2013. They called Ather Energy. And they started by two guys, and they were in India. I think it was Bangalore. They were studying there, and they were just sick of the smog and the dusty, dirty streets, and there were vehicles everywhere, and they wanted to build a better transportation system. So they started Ather Energy and wanted to put a electric scooter on the market. This was 2013. The EV market wasn't that built out. There were no charging system or infrastructure for charging. So they needed to build that as well. So they're starting to build on their business. And I think it was 2018, 5 years later, they put their first scooter on the market. They had the infrastructure in one city. Now it's an Indian city, so it's still quite a large market. But building infrastructure is insanely expensive. Over the time, they have also worked with their IP portfolio. And they had a key patent. They had patented connector, so the charging connector. You probably charge an electric car sometime, and that connector is quite bulky, and even bulkier when it's put on a small two-wheeler. So they had developed a smaller and more easier to handle connector for these vehicles. And they got the patent granted in, I think it's about 2020 somewhere. So now they had a patent, so they can forbid everybody else to use their connector. So that's great. No other EV manufacturer could use their connector or infrastructure builder. But they couldn't get funding for their infrastructure because it's insanely expensive. Their EV scooters were only sold probably in the only city where they had the infrastructure. So what they did, can you guess what they did?
Well, they most likely licensed out the patent for the connectors to everyone else in India.
Yeah, so they actually, exactly as you said, they went to all the competitors and said, you get our license to our patent for free. And we even help you install it in your production. That's only to the OEMs of electric scooters, not to infrastructure producers. So, and they bought that and they started to do that. And all of a sudden most of EV, two-wheeler EV scooter producers in India had their connector. And they could go to the investors and say, look, all scooters can charge in our infrastructure. Now we have the basis, the market to build out the infrastructure, and they get the funding, could build out the infrastructure, and by that also the market for their scooters became 10 times as large, or 100, I don't know. And that's a perfect example how you can use IP as a business tool, not just protecting and saying, no way, you can't get in here. And with that, they built a standard in the whole India. They drove the development of using renewable energy and electric scooters in the whole India.
I love that story so much, especially because
too.
it just shows that early on with limited funding, they went and they really understood IP and how they could use that. And then, when they couldn't raise funding, then they just used the tools in their toolbox to actually create almost an exclusive market for them later on, right? So
Correct.
IP can be always valuable because you have at least one more sort of decision that you can go to.
Yeah, you're perfectly right. And I think just it underlines the point that you don't know at the point of filing which one of these will be your diamond that you actually will use and leverage to get that funding to realize your market or whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that story so much. But one thing I really wanted to understand is, what are those red flags when you talk with an SME or startup or even just a founder, where you realize, okay, now we are really need to work on some sort of IP understanding and strategy. And even though they read your book or they read all of the information that you've given them, you just still have the feeling perhaps that they are still not grasping the value and the opportunities in IP.
I think one that I think we have touched point a bit on is that when you think, well, we have filed our patent, we're now satisfied, that's it, which is very common. Or now we file on this, or which I think is problematic because then you haven't understood exactly what we have discussed just before here, that you don't know which one will be valuable, which one will actually fall because somebody put so much effort into taking it away. You don't know that at that point. The second one is that they say, well, we will just finish our development and then before market launch, we file our IPR. And that's, so I would say that's a double error in terms of it just giving, at least if you're on a technology field which is very active, there's a lot of other competitors it's most likely that if you're 10 people working development in your company, or if you're 1,000, it doesn't matter that much, because the rest of the world are many, many more. And they are a lot of people, very smart people out there. And if it's a hot topic, hot technology area, somebody will most likely file that patent before you. And first to file is a thing in patents. If you're not first to file, you get nothing. So need to be the first. So it's better to file and file again, file a new one, and then withdraw the ones that wasn't that relevant and at a later stage. But get those filing in. You can't afford waiting as long as you're not there's a risk. And if you're working in a technology area that's not that hot, well, the risk is lower. But I always recommend be fast to file, but be also fast to withdraw. In that terms, you can get these first date in, and you can make a more informed decision, because 1 year later, you know a lot more about your product, about your market, and everything around it, and can make another decision and withdraw it if it wasn't what you thought it was.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, this is also so interesting to talk about, having a patent and using it as a checkbox. The first scenario that you described, I have it, I tick it, that's it. I don't use it as a tool, I just have it. Yeah, and I assume that happens a lot of times because of investors, or perhaps because of some sort of, requirement from someone to get that. So can you talk me through, especially for startups, how can IP rights help sort of foster investor relationships? And how is that, or why is that important even to investors to have?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because it depends on the IP knowledge and awareness of the investors. And I think this checkbox, the understanding that IP, or the use of IP as a checkbox or a registered rights, and in tech areas and for tech startup, patent especially, we have a patent, everybody's satisfied, is because many early stage investors, they don't have the knowledge either. So what they know to ask for is the checkbox. Do you have a patent? Yes, we have filed a patent. And the investor doesn't know what to ask, what's the follow-up question should be. And the startup hope it doesn't come a follow-up question, because they don't know what to answer anyway. If I generalize, that's how it very common is. And I think the follow-up question for the investor should be, what does it protect? And obviously, is it granted or is it an application? It doesn't necessarily, it's better that it's granted, because if it's still an application, you can still work with it and make it direct it into the right direction, depending on how your business evolves. And then the one other obvious question for the investor would be, who is the inventor, and have you made sure that you actually own it? Is the inventor still in the company? Have you assigned it properly? Or does anybody else's claims on this? But these questions are very seldom asked. And in the first discussion with the investor, they're probably not irrelevant. But when you dig in and make a due diligence, these questions should be asked. And as a startup, by preparing this, and instead of expecting the investor to ask them, just giving the investor the information. This is how we work with IP. This is important for us because this and this and this. We have secured this in these ways. We have these agreements in place. Then you're one step ahead and you build a lot of confidence from the investor that you are the person that can build a company, not just from the IP perspective, but a company with a very good structure where you have order in your house. And that's what an investor wants to see. Even though they're not competent in IP, I'm sure they're very competent in seeing if you can work with the structure and know why you're doing stuff.
It's just so interesting, right? Because sometimes you just end up with an investor with a bunch of potential funding, but they don't understand IP either, just like you.
No, and for most investors on an early stage, that's probably not their most important question
That's
or
also
issue
true,
either.
yeah.
They want a team and they potentially
Yeah,
understand the technology. But at some point, if you want to build a long-term successful company, IP is an issue.
yeah, yeah. And of course, there is also sort of this, well, I mean, paradox situation where you are a startup. It's difficult for you to plan long term, but IP is also a long term sort of
Yeah,
strategy.
I think the paradox with IP is that in the beginning, it doesn't matter because investors ask just like the checkbox question, but the market doesn't care. You can infringe, you can do things without having protection. Nobody cares
Yeah.
because they don't believe in you or your idea. And when you hit the market success, everybody cares. And if you don't have your IP in control, then you're screwed because then you're copied. And if you infringe without knowing it, you definitely will know it by then because then the millions are on stake. But at that point, you need to have done your homework beforehand.
I love that. And I think that's sort of a very good way of ending this part of the conversation. I think one takeaway for every single founder or SME who is listening to this is if you have no knowledge about IP, then there should be a light bulb sort of going off right now and prompting you to learn more about it. So before we jump into the rapid fire questions, what's the way you recommend for founders and startups to sort of self-learn about IP through either organizations like IPsteading or other sources?
Yeah, well, I'm building that service, but you can also start with the patent offices. The Swedish patent office has a lot of great information. I would say it's basic in terms of going through the intellectual property rights, so you get the basic understanding. Even more has European Patent Office and online courses, which all are free, and the same for EU IPO. They have a lot of good resources. And there you have a lot of theory that you can work through. What I try to build different is that it's not just theory, it's you should do this. It's implementation directly into your business. And I think we can, in the episode description, we can put a link into the free course so everybody can get started and avoid these early costly mistakes.
We will definitely do that. I think that's also something that we all would like to promote, more people to know much more about IP, at least the basics. And we are moving into the rapid fire questions part, where basically I'm going to ask you a few very short questions, and I would like you to answer them with a word, a phrase, or just with a sentence if possible.
Let's see what I can do.
Okay, so can we start? Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so the first piece of IP advice you keep hearing in the startup world.
It's not that important.
What's the one IP question that catches founders always off guard?
These are hard, rapid questions. How does this contribute to your business?
One IP myth you would love to retire for good.
You can't patent software.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. I think that deserves another episode.
That's probably a whole episode, yeah.
Okay, so last one, or the one before the guest question. If you could just give one piece of advice to a rookie founder about IP, what would that be?
Take action. Do something and start doing it. And keep doing it.
Okay, so the last question is from our previous guest, whose question is, which is your favorite IP event/conference in the whole world?
Oh, that's a tough question for me. It's been a very long time since I was in an IP event. I'm not... in that
You can also
term.
say you have.
I don't know if I ever been on one IP event in that sense, like a large IP conference at all. They're making the last guest very disappointed here. I think there's too few IP events directed to the IP users. That is the businesses that are business directed. And if the last guest hears this and want to give me some tips on good IP events, I'm happy to receive them. And with that, I just take the opportunity because I'm having an IP event in Gothenburg next month. It's called Series IP Game Day, where we actually play a game to learn IP. So during 3 hours, we build the groups. So we're about 40 people, 8 groups, and they build their own business. They get the base structure and get information during that time, but not the full information. The rest they have to piece together in their respective groups. And after these 3 hours, they have built their own business, a business that normally would take 10 years to build. And they have explored, experienced, and learned from all these situations that otherwise in real business building would take 10 years to actually learn. And those kind of events that actually build IP knowledge in terms of real experience, well, it's not real, but almost real, that I would see more of.
It's just such an important aspect to talk about as well, events in the space and making it a lot more accessible, making it a lot more sort of translated to the user's language, to the business language. And before we wrap up, for listeners who want to learn more about you or the company or even this event, where can they find you online?
I think the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I guess we put my LinkedIn profile in the episode description as well as my homepage, where you can read more about my services. And if you have ideas of how I can brand that a bit more compact and with a bit more punch, I'm happy to get feedback on that as well.
Jonas, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge and for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. And I have enjoyed every minute of our discussions. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in the next episode.
See you. Bye.